Crop News brought to you by Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Bill, thanks for joining us this morning at the Commodity Classic here in Manhattan. Supply and demand, which is one of the speech that you're going to give today, or the presentation you're going to give today. What does supply and demand look like this year coming into 2013?
Well, moving into 2013, we have some of the tightest grain stocks that we've seen in years, coming off a drought year, obviously, especially in the corn market, with demand still fairly strong, although it has backed off considerably on the export market side. The feed demand is still holding in there, so we're coming off of really tight stocks. Prices are approaching over $7 for corn, $8 wheat, $14 soybeans. So we're going into the spring in an environment that is going to attract more acres, because the market is demanding more grain. We don't have it, and we're going to have to rebuild those stocks hopefully this next year, weather dependent.
Well, bringing up the weather, I mean, we can plant all we want to plant, but if it doesn't grow, it doesn't grow. I mean, how does the weather factor into supply and demand, especially when it comes to pricing?
Well, the weather has a huge impact on the pricing structure that's out there. If we go into the spring, we continue through the drought conditions that we've had. We're looking at poor planting conditions, dry conditions, not good emergence, those types of things. Obviously, the price is going to respond to that and signal to the market, hey, you need to cut back on the demand side. You need to cut back on the usage. And we'll see some demand destruction probably at that point in time especially. It's going to really impact the livestock industry significantly. It'll also harm our exports even more than they already have been hit. The biggest issue we're looking at, though, is when we come into what the wheat crop is going to do, because the wheat crop from June through August is a big piece of the feed structure in the livestock industry, especially in the cattle business. And if we don't have a good wheat crop this year, coming off of a poor corn crop and not knowing what that corn crop's going to do come fall, that's when the prices can really get explosive if we have some bad weather conditions.
Well, when we talk about high prices, who does it hurt more? Does it hurt the consumer more? Does it hurt the producer, the beef producer more? Or does it hurt our exports more?
Well, the hurt is kind of a relative term when it comes to exports especially. That's one of the topics that I'll cover this morning, is that the export market has changed. The world export trade has changed considerably in the last decade plus, and the U.S. no longer is the primary or key supplier in soybeans for sure, and is moving that direction in corn as well. We're being replaced by South America, Brazil, Argentina, those countries as far as suppliers to the world market. So the export market has other options. The countries that need grain, as long as there's good production in those other parts of the world, they can get their grain. It'll lower our exports, which is actually helpful to the livestock industry in that we don't have that competing demand. Now, if we have weather problems around the world, that will also do it. The livestock industry is probably where it's going to be the biggest impact. The other big piece is the industrial use for ethanol. And that's one of the pieces that we're analyzing and trying to understand is how that's working out. But we see that the ethanol industry has moved beyond a value of just a replacement fuel to an octane value. And so the refiners are actually using it for that octane value. And so they will continue, we believe, to use a certain amount of ethanol, which will hold kind of a floor under that piece of the demand side of the puzzle. So obviously that only leaves livestock to be take the brunt of any further bumps in prices.
Crop News brought to you by the Kansas Association of Wheat Growers and Kansas Wheat Commission. Together, we are Kansas Wheat.
Bill, thank you for staying with us. How much does technology play? I mean, we're talking about drought-tolerant corn and soybeans that are Roundup ready. How much does technology play in helping keep prices down, I guess, or supply up and prices down?
Technology is an interesting factor in this, in that there are obviously benefits that we've seen. We have drought-tolerant corn, we don't have drought-proof corn. That's probably the biggest key that we have to face up to, is that we don't have corn that can grow without water. So if we have a lack of moisture, we've already got subsoil moisture issues. If we don't get the rains in a timely manner, that technology doesn't solve that problem. We do have better root structures, we have better growing plants, we have higher plant populations. All those things come into play and help improve those yields, but only if we get the needed moisture that we have to have. So the technology is a good thing, but it still doesn't negate Mother Nature, if you will.
Do you ever see a point where the U.S. would start importing grain?
Oh, we already have. We have seen that our corn imports in particular, typically in the history we've only imported some corn from Canada across the Michigan and those states. We've seen imports coming into the East Coast this year that have been years since we've been importing corn into that area. It's cheaper to get it out of Brazil, put it on a boat, sail it up here, offload it, and truck it or rail it to markets in the eastern states, especially the hog markets out there, than it is to take it out of Illinois or Iowa or anywhere like that to go that direction, because of the drought this year in Indiana and Ohio in particular. Really hurt the ability to supply those markets. So we have already seen a change that we are importing some corn into the U.S. this year.
Quick forecast for 2013. How do you think the year is going to shake out? If we get moisture, what do you think it'll look like versus not having moisture? Because we kind of have an idea of what it looks like without moisture, because we've lived through it.
Well, that's the basis that we start from when we start a new crop year's forecast or estimates as we look forward, as we go back to a normal, quote, year. So we go back to trend line yields, we go back to, typically look at planted acres based on the price and those types of things. What it's telling us right now is that given the demand structure we see out there, even with exports bumping back up, we are probably going to build stocks considerably in all the grains this next year. If we have normal conditions, if we get rain and we produce a crop, the corn stocks could nearly triple. That's because the demand that's out there right now is kind of capped, especially on the ethanol side. We see that that's kind of leveled out and doesn't have a whole lot of growth into it right now based on what we know. The livestock market, it's going to take a while to come back after going through a decline period, and the export market's going to come back some, but then that all depends upon what happens in other parts of the world. So our expectation, given normal weather, is that we will probably build stocks across all crops, and that prices will come back down, moderate back. Corn in that $5 range, wheat $6, soybeans probably staying up in the $12, $13 range.